This is the Generative AI Taskforce at the TUM Think Tank, bringing together a diverse team of experts and researchers who provide guidance to decision makers in government, industry, and civil society on issues related to the design, governance, and use of generative AI technologies. Today we're speaking with Alexander Pretschner from the TUM School of Computation, Information and Technology. His research interests cover all areas of software engineering, with a focus on testing and information security. Glad that you're here with me. Thank you for coming. Would you like to introduce yourself in a few words?
Yeah, first off, thanks very much for having me. I feel honored to be on the task force. I feel honored to be interviewed here to talk about a few things. I'm a professor for software and systems engineering at the Technical University of Munich, and I'm also heading the Bavarian Research Institute for Digital Transformation, where we look into societal impact of digital transformation. And do that in a purely, or not purely, but in a very interdisciplinary way, because one understanding there is that technology does change the world, of course, but it does so in domains outside technology. And this is where we have started long ago to look into the societal impact of digital transformation.
Thank you. That was already quite interesting in the field that you just so introduced. And when we stay in that logic, where do you see the greatest potential or use cases of generative AI in your field?
So if my field is software engineering, because that is the area that I'm most familiar with, then I see the biggest potential in having a system help us code. And that is something that has been known for quite some time now as the low-code movement. People have started to work with that kind of technologies maybe 5 years ago, and things became applicable, I would say maybe 3 years ago, with Copilot and that kind of technologies. And I think that generative language models or large language models with these generative features will have a humongous impact on the productivity with which we can write software. And I guess what is interesting to observe here is that the code that is written is not necessarily correct. We will need to better understand if code is correct and how we can teach people to see if it is correct. But what we are seeing is that productivity gains are enormous. So there's so much potential in just asking the system, hey, can you give me a code skeleton for this and that? System gives it to you, can play with it, that is really amazing. Quality isn't always super extra great, but it gives you a suggestion, and sometimes it's really faster to work with something that is almost done than to start from scratch.
No, for sure. And we see that in different branches as well.
Absolutely.
But now that you've touched on the correctness part, is there further challenges that you see within the field where you say like, oh, this is something that needs to be fixed?
Well, I think that really is the most fundamental problem that we're having. These systems, they do something. We know that they make mistakes. We know that they hallucinate sometimes. And I really think the biggest challenge is how we can understand if the system that has been implemented, in that case, in my domain, by ChatGPT, really is doing what it's supposed to do. I think that is the largest challenge. Interesting question is how we can teach people to be better at understanding if a system is correct, because that obviously used to be a problem that we've had in the past. But I think that is becoming more prominent now, given that we are shifting from creating content to rather verifying content, checking content. And I think the first soothing observation is probably we don't need to change too many things, because I'm convinced that you can be good at assessing things only if you have learned how to do that yourself. So if I want to assess code, then I need to be able to code myself, and that means that in principle there's not too many things that we need to change in terms of education. And on the other hand, of course, you can be trained explicitly at spotting problems in code, at understanding where the problems are. Every software engineer knows that. Every software engineer has been trained at that. But maybe we need to be a bit more at that. There used to be a joke on the internet some time ago where people said, hey, in the past, ChatGPT, we used to code 23 hours and test 1 hour. And hey, now we code 1 hour and test 23 hours. I don't think that really is the case, but it's to me that really is a clear path. So there's a few other technologies that people are currently playing with, and ChatGPT has been used to derive test cases as well. ChatGPT is also used to explain code. ChatGPT can be used to simplify code. ChatGPT can be used to rewrite variable names so that code becomes more understandable. And it's really amazing what these systems can do. So there's a bunch of different application areas for that kind of technologies.
Yeah, that's interesting because we think a lot about media literacy, right? And so now it comes generative AI or generative language models, literacy, and just for it to be more integral to actually be able to code and understand code for a wider
area.
A wider area. Mm.
But of course, that is the question, right? Will laymen be able to code using the technology? Well, if the software is not critical and if it doesn't really matter if it's correct, probably yes. Because if you have a stake in the software operating correctly, then you need some experience with understanding if the code is correct. And that will be the case for quite some time now, I think.
No, that's interesting. And because in the wider debate, we've talked about this hallucination and the correctness of outputs that these technologies generate. But is there, in the wider societal debate, is there something that you see is missing that we're not talking about or that you would like to debate?
Yeah. So I think what people aren't really talking about, what I think is the most fundamental concept that we need to tackle, that we need to be aware of in this sphere, I use the wrong English word here, judgmental qualities. So the ability to judge if something makes sense or doesn't make sense. And you reduce that to media literacy, but it's not just media literacy, right? It really is about getting some artifact and understand if that artifact makes sense. And my impression is that ChatGPT creates text now outside the world of code. That is it's like it's foggy. So sometimes you get text that looks very dense, that maybe is very dense, where you think it's very deep and it contains many arguments. And then if you try to really figure out what the point is that is being made, there is none. And I have to admit that sometimes I'm reading philosophical books, and there are some authors where I also get that impression. I wonder what the hell is the point that is being made here. And that capability of judging that what you are being told is making sense, is reasonable, that is important. And I'm, for some reason, I don't see that debate really being very prominent. So it's always about, and we need to verify, but the question is, what is the capabilities of people to be able to do that? And there's an interesting twist, because in Germany, 25 years ago, people started to think about school education, and they thought, hey, what really matters is not so much what we learn, but the competences that we acquire. And 5 years ago, with the results of various international tests in terms of where we stand in terms of math and other subjects, and people, I guess, came to a conclusion maybe that orientation towards competence isn't so unambiguously great. And I look forward to seeing what the debate here will be. I think a second discussion that is not really being had is when people think about concerns about ChatGPT. So I don't need to tell you, we're living in Germany, so what prevails are the concerns about that new technology. And I sometimes wonder what's the baseline for these concerns. So if you take the example of intelligent tutoring systems, then you may argue, hey, if we have a system that hallucinates in 10, 20, 30, 40% of the cases, and that, of course, is problematic. But if you have students, pupils who can get access to other kind of interactive education, then the question really is, how bad is that? Also, given that some teachers also don't really necessarily speak the truth or the up-to-date information in their field all the time. And then the question is, what is the baseline? And I think that is something that I'm missing in the wider debate. We somehow seem to suggest that technology can be used or cannot be used. It's good or bad in a very dichotomic way. And things are more complex than that, because it's really about, hey, what kind of risk are we willing to accept, and what does that mean in a specific context? And that is something that I'm missing in the debate. It's always about being good or bad. It's yes or no, but that is absolutely beyond the point. It's not about yes or no. It's about how.
I totally agree. Also with your first point about the skill of critical thinking and how that connects to writing, and I really think that is something that we need to collectively kind of figure out, and within this debate. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that as well. And given that I'm talking to an expert now about also the technology of GPT, and last year, I mean, commonly that wasn't really known. It only just came up and was made public and usable to broad audience, and suddenly we're having all these thoughts about generative AI or large language models. Where, from your point of view and your insights, where do you think this is going to be in like 12 months' time, considering that things move so fast now?
Let me just grab my crystal ball and tell you. So first off, in fact, these technologies have been used in the software engineering community before, right? I mentioned that technology has been around. We did play with it before ChatGPT, but of course, in that broad context, it wasn't really known. It's also interesting to see how that has re-sparked the debate on AI. My impression was that AI was a bit de-hyped at the time, and then there was an extra boost now when ChatGPT entered the scene. Where will we be 12 months from now? Who can tell? I believe that there will be tremendous improvements in quality, similar to the ones that we have seen from GPT 3.5, I believe, to 4.0. That is amazing, and things have really become much better. I believe there's a lot of room to improve these technologies further. That will be ever better. The question, of course, is there is a ceiling, and there will be some kind of saturation, and there will be some also frustration then after some time, because the technology maybe isn't able to do whatever we imagine it can do. So I can't tell you where we will be 12 months from now. I'm pretty convinced that technology will be much better. We will be surprised at how good that technology can be. And at the same time, I'm a bit concerned about how much regulation will be imposed on a piece of technology that is not even put in context, but that will be regulated as such, most likely. That is something that I think is scary.
I get it. And just before we let you go, just a quick insight. How do you yourself use these generative AI technologies?
Oh, actually, I use it all the time. So I use it for coding, in fact. I recently used it to get ideas on how to plan my trip to Portugal. And I asked it, so what I have with my family, and there's children, and there's that requirement, how would you organize the trip? And it gave me pretty good suggestions. I was really convinced at that. And in fact, I always use this when I think, hey, this is an interesting question. I don't really know what the answer is. Let's see what ChatGPT can give me. So I gave a talk on something. I forgot what that was. And there I needed a visualization of what culture was. And I asked ChatGPT, hey, how would you visualize culture? It came up with the suggestion to use an iceberg, because you have the spoken rules, the explicit rules that you can see, but then there's that body of unspoken rules. And I thought that was a pretty good image for that kind of problems. So actually, I'm curious, whenever I think, hey, I don't really know what the answer is, let's get some inspiration, then I'm using a ChatGPT. It's not that I have any specific task that I would regularly defer to ChatGPT, so I don't have it write emails or do that kind of things, but it's rather when I'm curious about something, then I let it play along.
Yeah, I'm going to try it out with the vacation planning.
Well, we should talk once again once I come back from that vacation.
And then cross-check. No, but thank you so much for your insights and this short introduction about yourself and your field. And thank you for taking the time to being here today.
Thanks so much for having me. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. If you have questions, challenges, or use cases that you want to bring to the task force, write us at TUM Think Tank at hfp.tum.de.